Welcome to the Youth Sport Podcast. My name is Rihanna Poskin, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly within youth sport. It feels great when a kid comes up to you and says, "Coach, because of you, my life changed in the best way." It would feel awful to hear that because of you, the coach, a kid doesn't want to have anything to do with it ever again. I believe that kids deserve to have fun, to learn, to grow, to compete, and to play in a great environment. Join me as I interview guests that spill the tea on youth sport in order to help you make an enormous impact with kids right now. This episode of the Youth Sport Podcast is brought to you by Lululemon. I am part of the Lululemon Collective and will receive commissions when you shop through my link. Buying something for you or your loved ones, like my favorite warm down joggers, helps me to continue to bring interesting and empowering conversations for everyone. I have to tell you, when I'm coaching, I want to make sure that I'm dressed appropriately, I'm comfortable, my clothes stand up to all kinds of random situations, and that I have pockets. You never know who's going to ask you to hold something for them or what random things you need to carry with you. The Lululemon warm down joggers take care of all of my needs. I invite you to find your go-to item by browsing through the entire Lululemon site. You won't be disappointed. Please use the link provided in the video description below to start shopping. Welcome back to another episode of the Youth Sport Podcast. I am really excited to have a guest with me all the way from St. Louis. Steve Pecher is joining me today. Steve Pecher is the president of facilities at the St. Louis Scott Gallagher Soccer Club. Steve coached for 20 years at Bush Soccer Club before it merged with Scott Gallagher and Metro to form St. Louis Scott Gallagher. He is the recipient of the United States Soccer Federation D coaching license. Steve is also formally inducted in the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, playing as a defender for the Dallas Tornadoes, St. Louis Steamers, Kansas City Comets, and the Los Angeles Lasers. Steve Pecher also earned 17 caps with the U.S. national team from 1976 to 1980. Now, on your Wikipedia page, it says that you had a couple of red cards against the Canadian team. And me being from Canada, we're going to get into that a little bit. I want to know all the details about what was happening between the U.S. and Canada at that point in time. But welcome, Steve. It's nice to meet you.
All right, thanks. It's nice to be here.
I'm looking forward to speaking with you further. Our topic today is going to be interesting because many of us have struggled finding the positive things that have come from the pandemic, but your club have a different take on it, and your soccer club realized that the pandemic impacted youth sport for the better. And that's what we're going to be talking about mostly today. But first off, I just wanted to let you know that we have something in common. I also have my USSF coaching license. And I just wanted to tell you a quick little story about when I got it. My now husband, but boyfriend at the time, we both went off on a little road trip to go and get our licenses so that we could run soccer camps at university. And we were all packed up. We were going to be cost efficient by saving some money, and we were going to camp for the weekend. And we had the basics, but we did not have very good rain camping equipment. So what ended up happening was we set up our tent. We're thinking everything is good. We go, we do our coaching day. And as the day progresses, it starts to rain a little bit and we're like, oh, it's going to be okay. So then we get back to the campsite. All of our stuff is soaked. And so for that evening, we had to scrounge to get wood for the fire and to dry out our stuff because we were there for the next day. And it was an adventure. I have to say it was an adventure. Needless to say, the next weekend that we went to finish off our coaching license, we ended up getting a hotel room and it worked out great. But I loved the coaching process. I loved coming together with like-minded people. And it's lovely for me now to be able to talk with people like yourself. What was your coaching experience like? What was your coaching course experience like?
Mine was a little different than yours, for sure. First of all, you shouldn't be camping. That's why they built hotels.
Yep.
But my D license actually was at the soccer park here in St. Louis that our club owns. We have a ballroom at the facility, and then we also have a number of turf fields right outside our front door. So I live 5 minutes away. So
Nice.
I was able to drive here 5 minutes, go into the ballroom, go outside to do the on the field tactics and stuff, and then drive home and have dinner, and then do the same thing the next day. And that was 2 weekends in a row. So I got to sleep in my own bed and come into the facility that I work at. So mine was a piece of cake compared to yours.
And you stayed dry the whole time, unless it was like a little drizzle. You probably had an overhang or something that you could get under.
Now, if it was raining, we stayed inside. So
There you go.
no, we stayed dry the whole time.
Nice, nice. Tell me about yourself. I would love to know what you were like as a player. What were you like in your younger days? How did you get into soccer?
Well, I could lie and tell you I was a very passionate, calm person on the field, but the history is that in St. Louis, soccer is the #1 youth sport and always has been. I have my grandfather is in the St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame as well as I am now, and my great uncle, actually, his name was Dent McSkimming, and he was the only reporter that covered the 1950 World Cup team that beat England, and he's in the National Soccer Hall of Fame. So I've got a lot of bloodlines here as regarding soccer is concerned. But so in St. Louis, you start playing when you're 5 years old back then. Normally at a Catholic grade school, everybody played. So started at 5 years old, went through, played a couple different sports at that time. But once I got to high school, I just focused on soccer. And at high school, we won the state championship my senior year, 1974. And then I went to a school called Florissant Valley Community College here in town, which is now has won 10 national championships under Coach Pete Sorber. But so did that in 1975. And then that finished up Thanksgiving weekend of 75. And then in February of 76, Pete Sorber, my current coach at Flow, was good friends with Al Miller, who was the coach with the Dallas Tornado. And Al called Pete one day and said, "Hey, do you have any players that I might be interested in?" And he said, "Yeah, actually, I think I have one." And so they flew me down, went through the preseason camp, the tryout part of it. And fortunately for me, I played center back, and they were bringing in an English center back at that time. And probably about a week before the season started, he called and said they're not coming. Him and his family were not going to make the move. So I was thrown into that position with Dallas from day one, and started every game, and was Rookie of the Year in 1976 in the North American Soccer League, and was sitting at a head table at 20 years old with Pele. He was the MVP of the league that year, and I was the Rookie of the Year, and we were sitting right next to each other, which is crazy to think about when I talk about it.
Yeah, but tell me more about it. What did you guys talk about?
Really didn't talk about much, to be honest with you. I was probably pretty dumbfounded at that time. I was 20 years old, probably a little cocky, and we got a lot of pictures taken with each other and stuff, but really didn't have a ton of conversation.
Okay.
But it was just, it's just something I can always think back about and tell my grandkids about and stuff like that. But I mean, this all happened within 12 months of me winning the junior college national championship in November of 75. 1976 rolls around, and I'm in Dallas starting and playing every game. And then in September, I got called into the national team. So this is all less than 12 months time frame. So it was a whirlwind time for me, and I was only 20 years old. So pretty crazy. And then immediately went on a tour and started World Cup qualifying. That's where the Canada games came into play, which we get to later. And then in 1979, in the winter of 79, the St. Louis Steamers were formed. And so I came back home along with a lot of the other St. Louis players and joined the Steamers. I was still under contract with Dallas, but they allowed the players to go back and forth. So started that. And that year we were the second largest drawing indoor sport professionally in North America, behind the Edmonton Oilers. We were averaging 17,500 people here in St. Louis, and went back to Dallas in 1980 in March and played through the summer, continued on with the national team stuff. And then I became a free agent from Dallas and signed a contract with the Steamers and stayed here. And then throughout my career, I played in Kansas City with the Comets for a year and a half. Actually was traded back to St. Louis because the coach moved here to St. Louis, and he brought me back with him. And then my last year and a half, 2 years, I finished up in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles Lasers.
Nice. And you paid the whole time enough that you don't have to work anywhere else?
Yeah, I never had to have another job. Although I will say my first year in Dallas, I signed an amateur contract so I could still play for the Olympic team as well.
Mhm.
And at that time, it was $50 a week.
Okay.
But the team put four of us up in an apartment, gave us a car, and gave us a stipend for groceries and stuff like that. So yeah, no, the first, and we worked some camps and stuff, but I don't consider that working. But
Yeah.
so I didn't have to have a regular job in the off season or anything. And then, it just went right into the national team and made a little bit of money there, but not much. We were making, I think, $100 a game or something at that time. And then I signed a bigger contract and, throughout the rest of my career. So I'd never had to have a sort of another job during my soccer career.
Nice. So you're living the dream.
It was perfect timing on my part. And I tell people all this time, right place, right time, as far as getting to Dallas. And then the Steamers started in St. Louis and I came here, and for about 4 or 5 years with the Steamers, it was the best time of my life because we were packing the arena here in St. Louis. And sometimes I think the capacity was 19,000 and they would announce 20,000 people. I mean, you couldn't move in the place. So I was just at the right place at the right time.
Right. I went over to Belgium when I was a teenager, and we were walking down the street one day, and the girl that I was staying with, she looked over and she's like, "That's so and so," and I didn't know who that was, but in that community, that guy was the guy. So was it the same for you? If you were walking down the street in St. Louis, would people recognize you?
In St. Louis, yes. And
Cool.
they still do actually. And not just me. It's all the cool, one of the cool things about the Steamers at the time was about 80% of the team was American players. And probably 60 to 70% of those players were from St. Louis. It'll never happen again. And the reason I say this is our defensive unit was the starting backfield for the national team.
Cool.
So if you could, if you stop and think about it, that'd be like taking the US national team right now, taking their four backs and putting them on an MLS team together. That'll never happen because of Europe and everything else. So it was just a unique situation. We probably had about 7 or 8 of the guys that were on the national team from St. Louis at that time were all playing on the Steamers. So unique opportunity, unique time, and it'll never happen again.
And it must have been really good development in the St. Louis area if you guys were producing that many good players.
Yeah, and we still are, actually. There's several players over in Europe that came up through our club. A lot of players in the MLS and the USL that came up through our club. So we continue to produce players, but St. Louis at that time, back then, was the hotbed, no doubt, capital of soccer in the United States, and just produced a ton of really good players. And it was just a unique time. But like I said at the beginning, St. Louis was always been the hotbed for soccer. It's always been the number one sport, still is, as far as the youth are concerned in the St. Louis area. Mm-hmm. And there were 5 players on the U.S. national team that beat England in the World Cup back in the 50s. So even back then, we were dominating the sport. Nice. And St. Louis University, when I was at junior college with Florissant Valley, St. Louis University was winning Division I. Quincy University, which is just up the road, which was predominantly St. Louis players, was winning the NAIA. University of Missouri St. Louis, based in St. Louis here, was winning Division II. I mean, we were dominating the sport back then, and for good reasons, the rest of the country has caught up with us, and which is great for the whole country as far as soccer is concerned. But we still do produce professional players, national team players.
Nice. And you said that your dad was also pretty established in the world. And so was he coaching with you?
No, not my dad. My grandfather.
Okay.
He's in the St. Louis Soccer Hall of Fame. And then my great uncle was the rider that followed him. My dad, actually, I'm from a family of 8 kids.
Okay.
So either my mom or dad, when I was growing up, would just drop us off at the school, and you would jump in the car with the coach and he would take you to the games. They really didn't see a lot of my games as when I was a youth, not until I became a professional player and they would come down to Dallas, or when I joined the St. Louis Steamers did they see me play a lot. You definitely didn't coach.
No. Well, my mom is one of 8 and I'm one of 5. So we know what it's like to have to shuffle a whole handful of kids all over the place. And I think the reality, and still the reality of what parents are dealing with now, is somebody has to work to pay for all of these things as well. And the luxury would be that you could show up and you could cheer your kids on for everything that they're doing. But I mean, if you're split 8 different ways with your family, you only have 2 people that can get there, but they also have to work. So the finances also are important to make sure that you guys can have those opportunities too.
Yeah, for sure. I would say now probably we get more parents at our games now than I did when that I'm coaching than I did when I was growing up, because back then, I mean, I was a family of 8, and in the area that I grew up in, that was either normal or small compared to everybody else.
No
So
way.
it was a big Catholic community. And, I mean, I had guys on the team that had 12, 13 brothers and sisters and stuff. So parents just didn't have the time to be able to go and sit and watch you play. So they would, like I said earlier, you'd all pile into the coach's station wagon, and he would drive you to the game, play the game, and bring you back and drop you off to school. And you'd either walk home or somebody would eventually pick you up.
Yeah.
And not forget, there were no cell phones back then either. So
Yeah, you had to be where you needed to be. Otherwise, you missed your ride, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And what about sibling rivalries? Was there any issues within your sibling group, or were you guys pretty close?
No, we were close, and still are. 7 of the 8 still live here in St. Louis. My oldest brother was a really good youth player, and also in high school, and then he played a little bit in college. But my other 2 brothers and my sisters really didn't get into the soccer part of it. They were doing other things. But so I was really, besides my older brother and I, were probably the 2 people in the family that really got heavily involved with soccer.
Cool. And you said that you had a bit of a temper. Is that what you were alluding to? What kind of a player? What kind of a kid were you?
Not a temper. I don't describe it as a temper, but I was very, very competitive. I do not like to lose. I still don't. Let's just say I would have disagreements with referees on the field.
Okay.
Probably a downfall of mine, to be honest with you. And then, but I was hard. I was a very physical type player on the field.
And with the way that you were coached, I'm really curious, what did coaches do to get the most out of you that you appreciated? And was there anything that coaches did that drove you crazy that actually made it worse for you?
Well, I was not a good practice player. I really didn't like to practice. I just wanted to play games. So my younger coaches, my youth coaches, which I think during grade school, 1st grade through 8th grade, I probably had 2 different coaches that whole time. They didn't really, it's not like it is today. They really didn't focus on the skills and that type of stuff. It was more of, playing hard, whether it was the physical part of the game or the fitness side of it. So I was always really fit from those coaches. Didn't really work on a lot of tactics or anything like that. I mean, back then when I first started playing, we played with 2 backs. And on an 11v11 field, which is crazy to think about now. And then when I got to high school, I went to a public school here in St. Louis. And like I said earlier, we ended up winning the state championship in 1974. But the coach I had was actually a former rugby player. He wasn't a soccer person at all. Taught at the school and, took this position. It was probably the most fit I ever was in my whole career, because that's mostly what we would do, is just fitness work, and didn't work on a lot of the skill type stuff. So I wasn't really known as a real skillful player, good enough, I guess, to get by, but I wasn't a person that was going to start dribbling around 3 or 4 different players. But I could read the game really well. I could strike the ball really well. And I played a physical type of game. So, it worked for me.
Yeah. And so now tell me about the red cards against Canada. What happened there?
If I remember the one that was up in, I can't remember if it was in Canada or Seattle, because back then with the national team, when we were playing Canada or Mexico, they would have to go. When we played Canada, we would play in Seattle if it was our home game, because they knew they could get a good crowd based on people coming in from Canada. And then when we would play Mexico, we would play in Los Angeles. And the reason we did that was, it's a heavy Mexican area, Mexican people, and people would also drive up or whatever. But I remember playing at the Coliseum one time, and we had 33,000 people there, and I think 3,000 were cheering for us. Same thing in Seattle. It just wasn't, but they did it just so they could get the revenue, and knew that they would be able to get the revenue. But anyway, so I can't remember if the game was in Seattle or Canada, but I just had a mix up with one of the players towards the end of the game, and I think both of us actually got thrown out of that game. The bigger one was the one that we actually had a playoff for the World Cup qualifier, and it was in Haiti, because we had to go find a neutral site because it was an extra game because we were tied on points, and we played in Haiti, and we were down at the time. It was later in the game as well, and we were down in the game, and I just went in on a hard tackle, and the referee threw me out. I'm sure I had some hard tackles leading up to that.
Uh-huh.
But that's the part that I remember. And then we ended up losing the game by a couple of goals, whether I was going to be on the field or not. But not something I'm real proud of, but it happened, and it was just the way I played the game, the style I played, and unfortunately, I got a red card in that game.
And what about the safety issues in Haiti? Was there anything that you guys were concerned about back then?
No, not really. Not even out walking around or anything like that. We would every day we'd go down to the market and stuff and shop around and that type of stuff and walk around the area, the whole city and stuff. And I don't think there were a lot of concerns, but again, when we were down there, I was 20, 21 years old. And when you're 20, 21 years old, you don't have a lot of concerns like that.
No, it's true.
You're not even thinking about that stuff. You're invincible. So.
Yeah, and then especially if you're representing your country, and you kind of feel like you're not that you're maybe thinking that you're a superstar, but maybe people have a certain opinion of you coming in, then you may be treated in a different kind of a way than what another person just traveling to the country might be experiencing.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, we were always around other people, and we weren't taking cabs or whatever. We had buses and team buses and that type of stuff. So we were protected. I probably just didn't know how much was going on the outside.
Yeah. Well, what a great experience for you to be able to travel, to experience just a culture in a different kind of way. I know that whenever I'm immersed into a different place as a person that's living there, it's a different feel. You get to see what the people are like and what the community is like. And I feel like soccer brings that all around the world. It's one of those things that people love and they want to get involved in. And I think it's something, there's some huge rivalries. Don't get me wrong. We see all kinds of things that happen at games when there's two teams that are pitted against each other, but the love of the game is a pretty cool thing. And I think soccer has done that worldwide. So for you to be able to experience that for your country is a pretty cool thing.
It was unbelievable. I mean, when I first joined the national team, we went to Colorado because we based there up in Colorado Springs so we could get the elevation because we had to go play Mexico. So, I was 20 years old and we were going to Mexico and Canada, and we took a tour of South America to get ready for those games as well. And then another trip we took was over to Germany and Sweden and Belgium and England and Scotland and Ireland. I mean, the list just goes on. And, we just, compared to what they do now, we weren't playing as many games, and I don't think they actually counted them as true national team games or whatever. But every fall we were taking a trip somewhere to different countries, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's move on to your coaching years. So what led you into coaching? Obviously you have a love of the game, but what did you want to give back to the game?
Well, I have 3 daughters. The middle one, Tressa, actually became the soccer player. Actually ended up playing college at St. Louis University here locally. But so when she was about 8 years old, I got her started in soccer with her little school team, and I started coaching there. And then as she got to, let's say, U10, we joined a local club here. It was a smaller club, and I put a team together and started coaching them. And then when they turned 12 is when they went to 11v11 size field. So I ended up, a buddy of mine, as actually the trainer of the St. Louis Steamers at the time. His daughter was playing on the Bush Soccer Club that was sponsored by Anheuser-Busch at the time. And so what we did was we merged our 2 teams together. to form this really good team. And so that's kind of how I got involved with coaching. And then I've been doing it ever since. And was it 20 some odd years ago, the Bush Soccer Club, the person that was running it, he left. And through my connections and stuff, I was able to get that position and ran that for, like I think you said earlier, 20 years. And then we put 3 local clubs here together to form St. Louis Scott Gallagher. And I became basically the vice president at that time, and have been here ever since at the soccer park here in St. Louis.
Nice. How was it coaching young girls? Did you have to adjust the way that you coached based on how other coaches coached you, or how was that transition?
The transition was easy. Believe it or not, off the field, I'm a totally different person. You put a jersey on me, I'm crazy, but off the field, I'm a totally different person. But I coached a boys team actually before I started coaching my daughter's team. I coached them for 1 year, and then, for whatever reason, I started coaching my daughter's team and took that over. Wasn't coaching the boys anymore. And I just found the girls I'm going to say, soak things up a lot more. They listen to, in my opinion, more. They want to do whatever they can to make sure it's done right. And then ever since then, that's what I did. And I raised 3 daughters, and I just think I have a really good handle on, what needs to be done with the female soccer player, at training and away from the field and, at games and that type of thing. And trust me, my teams are, I think anybody around here that knows me would tell you, my teams are competitive. They're fit because I brought that from my early years, and they play the game hard, and it's just the way I develop them on the field and my personality when I'm coaching. So might not be always the prettiest game, but I've been very successful with the way that I coach. So probably a little more mellow now than I was when I first started coaching.
Yeah.
I think like most people, so that part has probably been the biggest change for me over the years, but I still coach the girls pretty much the same way.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. When I first started coaching, I felt like I had to be serious, and I felt like we had to do things a certain way. And if it wasn't going well, I would not always take the blame myself. I would all look around and be like, oh, so frustrating. And then I'd look at it in a different kind of a way as the years went on and thought, okay, I'm part of this process as well. And I'm also part of the problems at some point in time as well. So you have to try and figure out, like, what am I doing and how can it be done? If the kids aren't responding to what I'm hoping that they're going to respond to, I have to take some responsibility in this as well. And just like what you said, mellowing out and just kind of taking a step back and being a little bit more aware of what the whole scene looks like is something that we all kind of have to go through in our own process with our own experience. But it is nice to have conversations like this with someone who's been coaching for so long, and then maybe you don't have to go through those years. And so what would be your biggest tip right now? So if you were to take your time starting coaching to now, what would be the biggest thing that you would say to a young coach that's just starting out?
Probably you have to judge your individual people that you have on that team. You got to learn their personalities, what makes them work, what makes them not work. I think it's no different than, coaching on a professional level as well. I just think you have to learn each other's personalities. But the other part for me, when I say mellowing out, was, at game time, when the game was going on, I was just more intense early on, and, probably arguing about a bunch of different little calls. And, for example, I find that, I'd be arguing about which way the ball, who kicked the ball out of bounds and who gets to throw in. Well, if you look at it, probably 90% of the time, whoever's throwing the ball in, the other team ends up getting the ball anyway. So you're probably better off letting the other team throw the ball in all the time. But just little things like that, and concentrate more on what's going on in the game and helping the kids that are sitting on the bench understand what's going on in the game, and then be prepared at halftime to be able to, have some constructive comments during halftime and that type of thing. And not worry about so much that you can't control, and worry about the stuff that you can control.
Nice. I like that. So our main topic today, we'll get into that now, is that your club kind of had this revelation that the pandemic was okay in youth sport arenas. So what were the positive things that you guys came up with because of the pandemic?
Well, I think the biggest thing was that we, you know, probably like everybody else, we felt like the kids needed to continue to be involved with sports, period, whether it was soccer or baseball or basketball, whatever the case may be. But so we were all meeting, when I say we, the staff was meeting weekly early on by Zoom, of course, and trying to come up with different ways to keep these kids involved. And I'll just give you like my examples on what we did with my teams and several of the other teams that are at the same level that mine are. But I had one of the moms on one of my teams who's a personal trainer. And so every Monday, I would have all my kids. And when I say all my kids, in the program that I'm involved with in the club, there's 100 players. So we would have all 100 players on a Zoom call every Monday night for an hour and 15 minutes or whatever. And this lady would run them through a workout, and they were able to do it at home. And, we invited brothers, sisters, whoever wanted to be on it as well. But we felt like we needed to keep them going in that direction because we knew at some point it would come to an end and we'd all be back outside again. And so we needed to, and I think mentally for sure they needed that. So, and then on, let's say Wednesday nights, we would do more of an instructional type Zoom call because our practices were Monday, Wednesday, Thursday prior to that.
Okay.
And are again. So we kind of tried to develop, a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday theme to kind of just keep them on track on what they were doing. Weekends, of course, there were no games going on, but at least we could keep them mentally and physically involved in what they were doing. And we were doing that throughout the whole club. It wasn't just my group. I just happened to have this one mom who volunteered her time, but
Nice.
we just felt like as a club that we weren't just going to go, okay, you know what, we don't know how long this is going to go, but we'll wait until we get back out on the field. And I know we're not the only club that did that, but we were very aggressive getting that up and running and trying to keep these kids mentally and physically involved so they weren't just sitting at home just thinking about this pandemic 24 hours a day. And we have, all the studies have shown that the youth that weren't involved in things were having and probably still are a much more difficult time dealing with the situation.
Yeah, you had some stats on the breakdown of mental health and how that was affecting kids. Let me just bring it up here. At the end of 2020, 73.7% of children who were not involved in sports exhibited signs of anxiety, compared to 18% of children who did participate in youth sports. Furthermore, 68.6% of children who did not play sports reported experiencing depression, compared to 42.1% of child athletes. And so, not, you've mentioned already the physical side that you were able to keep them going, but mentally as well. I think we do forget that there is this community that they have a part of, and that brings them all kinds of things in their life, whether it be self-confidence or just a sense of belonging. And so you created a space where then they could see each other without actually being together.
Yeah, for sure. And we felt it was and not just on the female side, but the male side of the club as well. And we just felt it was very, very important, and the other part is that we were trying to get to a point where, once we did get back outside and start training, that, they weren't completely away from soccer for that long period of time. And we're ready to go as soon as we got back outside. So, when we got back outside, there were protocols and precautions that were put in place. But for the most part, once we got back outside, then we were up and running. But we just felt like it was very important to get these kids back involved as soon as we could. And that's why we heavily relied on technology, basically.
Yeah, I've also noticed that around just even talking to parents in our community and then doing some research online, that there are kids within, I would say, like 13 to 16 years of age, kind of age group, that decided that they weren't going to go back into sport. It was almost like they got their break And then life took a change for them. And then they were kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do that again. And so what was your experience? Did you guys have any athletes that fell off, or were you able to keep them?
No, we actually, our numbers have stayed pretty much the same through this whole process. And we think a lot of it was because of what we did for them during the downtime. But we're a club of about 4,000 competitive players, and we're still right around that number. So we felt like we might get like a 20% drop when everything came back. But we didn't. We basically were at 100%.
Nice.
And I think a lot of it was because of all the stuff that we did during that downtime.
What were the fun things that you guys were able to incorporate? Because I know that Zoom calls were really tricky for us as well, where you don't want to just get on another call, especially during our lockdown period where the kids were actually at home and not even in school. So all day they were on their screen, and then they were being asked to jump on a call again in the evening in order to keep up with their activities. And so what were the cool things that you guys were able to do to keep those kids engaged, even though it was just on a screen the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, for my groups, I think part of the Monday night, like I said, was one of the moms running it. It wasn't me. It wasn't one of my other coaches, dictating what they're supposed to be doing and all that stuff. But I actually had a mom, who's a physical personal trainer running that show. So I think there was a connection there for all the female athletes to be able to, be on with her. And then we would give them homework. Sometimes they had homework anyway, because, we would have them, this day you have to, here's what you need to do this day. Go in the basement, wherever you go outside, whatever you want to do. Here's the things that we want you to do each day or whatever, 15 minutes of this, 15, whatever it was. And there was every once in a while, we would have some of the older girls actually run, the workout program that on a Thursday night or whatever, we would put them in charge of it. And so that way it wasn't always us doing it. And within the club, we would also have contests as well. And that was for the boys and the girls side, coming up with creative different things you could do outside by yourself or whatever, or with your brother or sister or whatever. And then they would send in the videos and stuff like that. So we had contests like that going on. One of the things that, and, something maybe you might want to do one day is Scott McDaniel, who is the director of coaching for the girls side here at the club, has started a women's leadership group. It's been going on for a few years now. So he was heavily involved in that during that time frame too. And we're just trying to develop more female players, female coaches later on, all that type of stuff. And he has guest speakers and that type of thing every once a quarter or whatever. But that program would meet too and invite all the female players in the club to get on with that. And we had, Alyssa Motz, who grew up in the club that plays for Chicago Red Stars. My niece, Katie Jo Spizak, played at Texas A&M and played professionally and is now, with I think the Washington Spirit now or whatever. So people like that grew up in the club, then one night we had a lady, her name's Kathy Casso, who grew up in the club and became one of the head people at Anheuser-Busch. And she's now back coaching in the club, but she was big into marketing and stuff like that. So she was on one of the calls as well. So we had all that type of stuff going on for the kids, not just the training part of it, but some other stuff that will help them develop, as they go through life. So.
Yeah, and it helps to inspire them. I think anytime that you look up to anybody that has some success, then you want to say, oh, maybe I can do that too. And it can motivate you to do a little bit of extra. So maybe if they teach you something, then you'll be more inspired to go outside and keep going instead of sitting around watching a show or something like that. So that's great. Yeah. Have you changed anything now that you're back together in person based on what you saw worked while you were on Zoom calls?
Boy, that's a good question. I mean, we're all back outside training. We have been for a long time. So training has kind of gotten back into what we were doing pre-COVID. We do rely on more Zoom calls now than we did prior to the pandemic regarding if we need either a parent meeting or players or whatever, but we've just been using the technology with that part of it. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I would say most of the stuff that we're doing now is back on the field. So, we started playing again. We started training, I think, back in June last year, just because the area, the political side of it allowed us to do that. So we missed 3 or 4 months, and then we were back up and running again. So, but the Zoom call part of it has stirred up, I know on our ECNL side, when they go out of town, they have ECNL, the coaches have ECNL Zoom calls with each individual team on a Friday night once everybody gets into the hotel. Or if they're playing at home and they're going over the weekend and all that type of stuff, which we didn't do pre-COVID. So, that type of stuff has now come into play.
And how long were you guys completely shut down, or were you completely shut down?
Well, we were completely shut down pretty much March, April, and May, and then slowly started getting back outside in June.
Okay, so that's a small window compared to what other places may have gone through.
There's there's still some states that are still shut down, but here locally, it was a little different in that the different areas all had different rules. It wasn't one rule for everybody, but at the soccer park here in Fenton, we were able to get outside pretty quickly, I would say. And we had one of our parents in the club has 2 daughters playing in the club, Dr. Newland, and he was actually on the task force for St. Louis. So we were able to, I could pick up I became the, as they call me, Dr. COVID. I was a COVID person for the club, but I was able to call him at any time of the day and bounce things off of him and make sure we were doing things correctly and stuff. So, we started off by, it was mandatory that the kids had to wear a mask once they got out of the car and until the practice actually started. And then by, the same thing going back out. Once, if they took a water break, they had to put a mask on if they were sitting around, and just stuff like that we put into place. And of course we did all the protocol stuff around our facilities and everything. But the good thing was we were able to get back out and start playing. And I think it was a huge benefit for the kids.
Yeah, and if you could run any health statistics, I know you're not actually a doctor, Dr. COVID, but if you could tell us just the success of it, were you guys able to stay open and practicing for as long as possible? You weren't experiencing any transmissions or problems within the players?
No, we didn't. And what we were finding, and I think what Dr. Newland would verify, is that we didn't find any transmissions within the team. So, and what I mean by that is, if somebody called me or sent me an email and said, hey, I've got a player who has tested positive, if we backtracked it, we found out it was from maybe a friend in the neighborhood that they got together with, or a family member or whatever. But internally within their teams, it wasn't spreading.
Okay.
And what he confirmed was through watching and tracking professional sports and college sports as well, was mostly professional, but that you're just not seeing, and you're still not seeing a big spread within a team. Typically it's somebody that, you find out that they've tested positive, but they were with some people outside their team that somebody got it from somebody else or whatever. But just being an outdoor sport was a huge benefit for us, because and we still haven't seen it spreading within a team.
Yeah, for sure. And now you have such a big club. What do you allocate your success to with just how you guys run everything? What could you say to other organizations in order to help them build the game and the numbers within there?
Well, the first thing for us is that we have a lot of history. The club, I know the merger part of it's been in existence for about 12 years now, but each club has been in existence since the early 70s and has won national championships. I can't even count them, and regional and state cups and all that. Now we have, but currently within our club, we provide a lot to what we call our classic level players. We have our academy programs on the boys side, and then we have ECNL on the girls side. So we're playing in the top platform. So we have that to offer as well. And then we have the next level with ECNL Regional League and the ECNL boys and, everything. So we're playing at the highest levels that you can in the country. So for those players, we have that to offer, but also for the classic level players, they have that pathway too, that, if somebody does develop, we are a club that will actually move. We sit down with the parents, the players, and, kind of educate them a little bit about, hey, you know what, your daughter has developed into this type of player. We feel like she needs to be playing here now. And if they were adamant and said, no, we're great, we want to stay with her friends and all that stuff, we allow that to happen. But we also have this other pathway for that player who develops to be into that level, that as well. But within the club, I think we have an awesome staff. A lot of ex-professional players are here. We're fortunate in the St. Louis area, as we've talked about, that there's so many people that grew up playing soccer that either our full-time staff or our part-time staff have all played at a high level, and then a lot of our parent coaches, our volunteer coaches, have also played in at least college level, just because of the situation we have here in St. Louis. But we have the facilities. I'm sitting at the Worldwide Technology Soccer Park, which has been here since the early 70s as well. It's the best complex in St. Louis and one of the best complexes in probably the country. We've hosted national team games here in the past, but we also provide for those classic level players technical training on the weekends. We have what we call soccer school that they can get involved with. We have club training during the week. We have goalie training. We have probably 10 people on our goalkeeping staff. So we just have so much to offer for every level of player.
Nice. And so you create the hub, you create the vibe that people want to be a part of.
Yes. And one of the other things that probably doesn't get talked about a lot is that we also, our mission statement has in there that we're trying to develop the person to be the best person on the field, but also off the field. So we have a program called Upper 90, which is our charitable part of the club. And we don't make it mandatory, but we heavily get all the teams heavily involved in picking a charity and that the kids get involved with. And not as simple as, hey, everybody bring $10 and we're going to donate, $2,000 to this charity. We want the kids to be involved and see what goes on with that charity. So we have them more on a hands-on situation. And we do that on a year-round basis. Of course, the biggest time is during the holidays, but we do that on a year-round basis. And we hit so many different levels of people and charities around St. Louis that we don't brag about it at all. We just have the program and it's up and running. And then we have a big inner city program, and we're the only club in town that does that. So we actually financially take care of that. We put staff into the city to try and, get the soccer out to more people and stuff and get more people involved and that type of thing. So we have off the field stuff going on all the time.
That's nice. So you're servicing a lot of other people. And I think that a lot of times when you give back, a lot of what happens, the karma comes right back to you. So it's the cyclical effect. And if you're doing good things, then hopefully you feel obviously good about helping someone else. And it just makes everybody in a better place. I have a couple more questions to finish off. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for taking this time with me. So we've already talked about advice for coaches, but now I would love for you to offer advice to athletes. So based on your experience, based on you being a coach for so many years, what would be your best advice for a kid that's going through everything that they're going through right now and that they really love their game and just to make it the best possible for them? What would you say to an athlete?
Well, they should train 7 days a week.
He's shaking his head no. I just interrupted him, but he's shaking his head no.
I'm just kidding. No, I think kids have to have fun, and I think as a coach, we have to allow that to happen. There are times to be serious, but there are also time to have fun, whether it's a training or whatever. We have a program here on the girls' side. We call it More Than a Game, MTAG. So we try and do things either, for instance, like this Thursday, we have a Halloween. The kids all come to practice. They'll all have their Halloween costumes on, and we'll have a pizza party for them afterwards and just that type of stuff. When we go on the road, team dinners as much as we can now with all the COVID stuff, but just stuff like that we're trying to do. But I think players are competitive by nature, and they want to do the best they can and play the hardest they can and all that stuff. I think it's also at the younger ages, it's also got to be about, if somebody else does, for instance, on my team, I've got basketball players, I've got hockey players, I've got softball players, and as long as it works into the schedules, they have to be able to do that stuff as well. If they get so serious at some point, they'll figure it out and say, you know what, soccer is what I want to do. But you have to let them to be able to make that decision going forward. And I think as a parent, you have to allow that to happen as well. And I read a survey years ago that they asked youth players, what's the worst thing about playing sports? And the overwhelming response was the ride to and from either practice or games. With my daughter, I never talked about the game unless she wanted to talk about the game, and I believe that that's the way it should be, because if you put so much stress on that individual player, your daughter, your son, that they're just going to fold up, get burnt out, however you want to call it. And, they're not going to want to play anymore. And I think you just have to enjoy it. I try and tell parents all the time, just enjoy your son or daughter while you can, because for instance, you get a player that is playing, at a pretty decent level or whatever, and the parent is so intense all the time and, emailing and calling and is intense on the sidelines and sitting by the practice field, watching practice all the time. And then all of a sudden an ACL comes and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I never thought that would happen. So I really try and stress that just sit back, enjoy the game, enjoy them while they're playing, because at some point it's going to end, but just sit back and enjoy it. And if you can do that as a parent, I think that will help the individual player as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And the last question that I have for you is, thinking back on your younger self, what advice would you give to him if you could say anything now?
Well, there's no doubt, number one, and all my coaches would say the same thing, is I should have left the referees alone and let them ref the game, because I was referee. I'd get a yellow card for arguing a call that I'm not going to change. And, it affected the rest of my game, because now if I'm sitting on a yellow, right, I can't maybe play the way I want to play. But at the end of the day, you're not going to change the call anyway. And I would think every coach that I've had that would be the number one thing that they would change for me if they could. And if I could have gone back, that's the one thing I would have changed. I wish somebody at an early age as a coach would have grabbed me and said, we're not doing this anymore. Or you're going to be sitting on the bench or whatever. But I didn't have that. Nobody ever came and really did that really until I became a professional player. It's when a coach would come to me and, have that discussion. But if somebody would have done it at an early age, and I blame myself. I don't blame the coach, but if somebody would have really, really put a tough line on me at that point, then that part probably would have changed. So, but that would be the number one thing for me. And I said it earlier, I think, when I first started coaching, even at the youth level, I was doing the same thing from the sidelines, and I eventually figured it out and was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not focusing on what I should be focusing on.
Yeah, and actually, I just saw a headline. It was in hockey, though, but it said, "Where are all the referees? Because they aren't coming back." And so we have to make sure that those officials are taken care of. One, for
Yes,
safety. One of the
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but around the country, referee in every sport is an issue, and especially for us here in St. Louis soccer, we're getting games canceled because we just don't have enough referees. Our tournaments aren't as big because we can't, we might have a tournament that normally brings in 400 teams, and now we've got to go to like 250 to 300 because we just don't have enough referees to cover it. And there's a number of reasons, the pandemic, and referees didn't want to come back out and be around people, but the biggest part is that the abuse they're taking from the sidelines, whether it's the coaches, the players, or the parents, we are doing the best we can right now to try and control that. But, at the end of the day, everybody has to take it upon themselves to get that done.
Yeah, and I think mentally, if you kind of are about to say something, if you've got some anger that's going to be directed at the referees, you might want to check in and just say, hey, won't even have a game. We won't have a a sport if these men and women aren't here. So maybe just take a step back, and who knows, it might be a bad call, but at that point in time, like you said, you're really not going to be able to change what it's going to be. So change the way you are, and then, just let these people go about their business so that they can come back and let these kids keep on playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Steve. That was such a fun conversation. I think it's going to be interesting for other people to figure out what's been going on in St. Louis. And do you want to give your club a plug? That was a hard thing to say, club and plug, so that people can find where you are and see all the great work that you're doing.
Yeah, our website is slsgsoccer.com. And, I think most people around the country probably have heard of us, either with Bush Soccer Club, Scott Gallagher Soccer Club, or Metro United Soccer Club, which we've now joined in, or St. Louis Scott Gallagher. So yeah, I mean, the website's probably the best way to go. All our history's on there and everything else that we do for, not only for our own players, but for the community.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate this chat, and good luck with all of your season. You must be in the off season now, but I'm sure you're training year round. So, oh, he's shaking his head. No, you guys are full on right now.
Yes, we are. We probably full on, most of our teams will shut down right around Thanksgiving. So okay. Now my groups will continue on, and some of the other groups, but for the most part, right around Thanksgiving is when everybody stops league play and stuff for a couple months. So.
Awesome. Well, finish off strong. It's great that you guys are playing, and thanks again.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
And if anybody wants to find all of these conversations, you can always check out my info. Wherever you find your podcast, you will find the Youth Sport Podcast. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you guys on the next conversation. Take care.